All right. Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Todd. And I'm so pleased to be here and have a chance to share some work with everybody and to talk a little bit about some of the research that I've been fortunate enough to do over the last few years. I'm going to talk about a couple of different areas of research, and what I really want to be able to do with this talk is to show how some of the work that I've done with a number of colleagues and students can kind of come together and hopefully help people with aphasia better be able to participate in life. So we're going to talk a lot about reading and written materials. I have some disclosures here, and I want to start, and this is known to this group, this audience, but I want to start by talking about the chronic and persistent challenges with reading that people with aphasia experience. And to the lay public, we tend to think, or they tend to think a lot about aphasia as being a problem speaking. And certainly that's a challenge of aphasia. But those of us who work with people, know people, care about people, and the people who are experiencing aphasia know that reading challenges can be quite life altering. Reading is something that we use to get information about safety, and sorry, my cat's in the background, he wants to join too, about medical information, about things like, reading a novel and being able to share about that novel with friends, reading newspapers, using email and text messages to, and social media to bond and form social relationships, and also to share information with people. So reading is a really important life task, and people with aphasia have these persistent problems. I just have a couple of examples here to highlight some of the importance of reading and how it fits into the work by Ora Kagan and colleagues who've talked about living with aphasia in these different domains, and how important reading is for participation in different domains. So my colleagues and I did some work where we talked with people with aphasia about some of the challenges and changes that they experienced related to reading after they had a stroke and had aphasia. And one of the things that we found in talking with these folks was that there were different approaches to managing these reading challenges. And one of those I'm going to talk about first was seeking out adapted materials. So those are what we would refer to as like aphasia-friendly materials. And then later in the talk, I'm going to share some information about technology supports and how those can help as well. So I'm going to start by talking about a project where I've had the pleasure to collaborate with a colleague in occupational therapy, Dr. Elena Donoso Brown, and her students. And this collaboration has been life-changing in terms of what I've been able to do professionally and how I've started to think about my work with people with aphasia. We have started some of this work by looking at home programs or home practice programs that are typically given for individuals post-stroke so that they can get that necessary repetitive practice with upper extremity movements, for example. And what we noted was that a lot of people with aphasia have been left out of some of these research studies. And so individuals who have, or researchers who've been studying the issue of home programs and upper extremity movement are excluding people with severe aphasia. And so we wanted to do a study where we purposefully included people with aphasia. And for that purpose, we created some aphasia-friendly materials. One of the things I love about collaborating with colleagues is getting to know about their discipline. And occupational therapists, in my view, have been thinking about life participation for such a long time. And they do this in such a great way that really, again, influences my practice. And I have this picture here because it was an example of one of the upper extremity home programs that one of our research participants was interested in. Is he wanted to be able to brush his dog again. And so for his home practice activity, instead of doing some non-functional upper extremity movement repetitively, he practiced brushing his dog each day. And so just a really nice example about how our colleagues are good models of bringing in functional and participation activities. So here's an example of how we modified some of our assessment materials. Sorry, I've got a little bit of company here. How we modified some of our assessment materials. So we asked individuals who participated in our study about what it was like for them to hold a book. So was this something that they never did, or they do as often as they did pre-stroke? And we also asked them about the quality of the movement. And you can see here that we've modified this scale by including some keywords, by including a photograph, and then including the scale with text as well as images. And then I wanted to show you a quick example here. And sorry, the quality's not as good, but this is a real example of how we used this tool during the sessions. So one of the things that we emphasized was it's not enough to just modify materials, but additionally using good communication partner training strategies. So writing down keywords, or you can see here, this was somebody who shaved his face. So we crossed off putting the makeup on, and we confirmed with him what he was selecting. We also modified the materials that we sent home with people. So here's an example of the instructions we provided. We had some really simple text. We had step-by-step photographs of that person actually completing the task. So in the case of the guy brushing his dog, we had step-by-step instructions or photos of him doing the different steps of petting his dog. And then we had, like every good home program, we wanted to have a way for people to record this information. And this is something we're still learning a lot about, but we created some forms that indicated the day and showed the person that information. And then instead of having to write down the number of repetitions, they could circle that information. We highlighted or shaded the goal for their sessions. And then the individuals all were provided with kind of an exercise band that had the time on it. So they could record the time just by copying. And then we had some questions that they filled out, again, using photographs and Likert scales. So there was a lot of information that we collected in interviews with people after this home program. And I want to just emphasize for my purposes here today, some of the things that the people with aphasia taught us about the instructions. They said there were some things that were helpful. They liked that there was writing along with the instructions. They liked that there were photographs and images. They found those helpful. Sometimes they thought some aspects were difficult, like recording the time required a lot of extra thinking. And they really liked that we spent time with them doing in-person demonstrations, but it wasn't enough. And one of the suggestions that we came up with as a result of talking with these folks with aphasia was having some video examples would have helped supplement what they were doing. So some takeaways from that research, aphasia-friendly modifications are helpful. Video demonstrations would be even more helpful. Needing to record times was very difficult, so it's something we still need to work on in this kind of home program type project. And then the home program we gave them was both feasible and flexible, which was important to them. So I want to move on now. I'm trying to cram as much into this time as possible. I want to talk about my master's thesis student and a wonderful project that she came up with and just defended about a month ago successfully. So Anna Saylor was really interested in thinking about activities that people with aphasia needed to be able to do. And one of those activities is being able to take medication. And so she looked at aphasia-friendly medication instructions. So she took, and this is a made-up medication, but she took a traditional medication and the kind of information that would be written up when you go to the pharmacy and they provide you those sheets and sheets of paper. She recreated those or made some examples of those. She gave those to people with aphasia, and she also gave them some sheets that had exactly the same information, but presented in a more aphasia-friendly way. So simplified sentences, some images, more space, larger font. And she asked people with aphasia some comprehension questions. She also included some people without aphasia. I'm going to emphasize for our chat today that the lower blue line, which is the people with aphasia, and how they showed increased comprehension when provided with aphasia-friendly modifications. One thing to note though is their comprehension still isn't as good as some of the people without aphasia. And so one of her conclusions is that these instructions alone, aphasia-friendly instructions, may not be enough. Folks with aphasia and people without aphasia, as always, provide us with some wonderful information for us to consider beyond just their accuracy. So they talked about things that they liked that were helpful with the modified instructions. And then they talked to us about things that weren't so helpful. One of the things that they told us about was that when you made aphasia-friendly instructions, it made for a lot more paper. And they didn't care for having so many different pages. So the conclusions from this were that aphasia-friendly modifications were helpful for folks with aphasia. There are some additional strategies, and so we've talked a lot about training pharmacists and other healthcare providers to supplement aphasia-friendly medication instructions. And then the amount of paper continues to be a concern. So there's more work to be done here. So I'm gonna shift gears for the rest of my time here and talk instead about technology supports that can help people with aphasia when it comes to reading comprehension. And one of the reasons that my team is really interested in this topic is that people with aphasia, although they like the aphasia-friendly modifications, a lot of them were telling us that one of the challenges in using these types of materials is it made them very dependent on others. So clinicians or family members would need to provide a lot of extra support in order for them to be successful with reading. And just like all of us, people with aphasia wanted to be more independent. And so my colleagues and I started to investigate strategies, technology being that strategy, to help people with aphasia be more independent while also supporting these chronic, persistent reading impairments. So the technology that we looked at is text-to-speech systems. And if you're not familiar with these systems, although they're really common now, they take written material, and either you can take a picture with your phone or you can upload the text on a computer or something like that. The program analyzes the text and produces some type of spoken output. The result of this is simultaneous presentation or combined presentation of both written words and spoken output. The potential benefits for people with aphasia, and maybe even people without aphasia, is that this can reduce some of the cognitive and linguistic demands. It can increase the independence of people with aphasia, as I mentioned. And also, text-to-speech systems come, especially now when more and more of them are being created, they come with all these great features. So you can change the voice. You can pick the voice that sounds best to you. You can change the rate of speech, so you can slow it down or speed it up. Maybe some of you who listen to audiobooks are familiar with that, and you have a rate that you like to listen to. You can also add highlighting, a highlighting of words or sentences. And you also can add some picture support. So there's a lot of potential benefits that seem worth exploring with this technology. I'm not here to talk about a particular type of technology, and I'm certainly not an expert in every bit of text-to-speech technology that's available, but here's a couple of examples if you aren't super familiar. There's a ton of programs, and the price ranges are huge, from free to hundreds of dollars. So I want to acknowledge my team before I dive into a little bit of the work that we've done. Kelly Nolman Porter, Jesse Brown, and Karen Hux. We've been working together for many years now as a really successful team. We have great conversations and have always kind of kept as our main focus, what is it that we can do to help people with aphasia? And it's been a great collaboration. So I'm going to go through some of our findings quickly because I want to talk about how through these multiple studies, we've come to some conclusions and where we're headed next. So we started by looking at sentences, and we compared what happens when you give people just written information, just auditory information, or text to speech, which is this combined. And in this graph, we look at this across different severities. And to be honest, it doesn't matter. So there was no difference in comprehension accuracy across these different conditions for sentences. What we did find was that people with aphasia, by and large, most preferred the combined condition. So although there wasn't a difference in comprehension, even across the different areas or different levels of severity, combined was typically most preferred. You can see for people with severe aphasia, auditory was also preferred. So then we also looked at the same question in narratives, because people don't really want to read just sentences. A lot of people with aphasia want to get back to reading longer information. So our narratives look something like this. So pretty short with some comprehension questions. We asked, we compared again these same conditions. We had some shorter narratives and longer narratives. What we found was that comprehension accuracy was highest in the combined condition, but only for long narratives, so longer pieces of information. Again, people with aphasia preferred the combined condition, more text-to-speech like. And then we tried to get, again, more and more real life, and we used actual newspaper articles, which is what we've been using for our studies from now on, little small town newspaper stories. And we've looked at reading comprehension using different conditions for these newspaper articles. So here's an example. Note that there's a lot of cat stories. So for this study, we compared the same kinds of conditions again. What we found was that comprehension accuracy was higher in the combined and written only conditions. Again, I feel like a broken record. People with aphasia most preferred the combined condition. So I think you're likely seeing a pattern that started to develop here. Then we were interested in looking at these different features. So we started to look at speech rate. So how quickly is the spoken output presented? And what we found here was that there was no difference in comprehension accuracy. So we had 113 words per minute, 154 words per minute, and 200 words per minute on average. People listened and read these stories and answered comprehension questions. Again, people with aphasia had a strong preference that emerged. They preferred the medium rate. Almost, the majority of people preferred the medium rate. And they told us things like, for example, the medium rate most matches my reading rate. And that's what I like. Some people said the same thing about the fast condition, but a lot of people said the fast condition was too fast and the slow condition was too slow and was boring. So what can we take away from all of this? Even though we didn't have a lot of emerging greater comprehension accuracy, it seemed that text-to-speech support may help some people with aphasia. And what is definitely clear is that there's a preference for what text-to-speech can offer in this combined modality. And that's also true for a medium rate of speech, even though that doesn't match all the performance differences that we saw. So some future directions, I think it seems worthwhile to be looking at how can we support other healthcare professionals to create aphasia-friendly modifications in the materials that they use. We're really interested in looking at eye tracking across some of our reading studies to see what people with aphasia are doing while they're completing different reading tasks. We're also interested in evaluating comprehension when we have people with aphasia choose the features that they like the most. So if they want to have highlighting, or they want to have a slower rate of speech, or they want to have a faster rate of speech, if you have your absolutely preferred system, does that improve your comprehension? Because we really believe that there's something to be said about preferences and what we like best. And then we're also starting to look at social validity. And a little sneak peek at some of those results is that people with aphasia are telling us, I don't need to use text-to-speech for shorter things like recipe cards or for looking at a calendar. But what I need what I might need text-to-speech for is reading novels or reading magazine articles. So it's interesting to think about, where does text-to-speech actually fit into someone's life? So in terms of clinical implications, I would recommend to clinicians that they look at different types of reading comprehension supports and how performance changes with different types of supports. It's very likely that multiple strategies will be needed. And in terms of text-to-speech, it seems like features and preferences may be a really important consideration. So I think I'm doing pretty well on time. I tried to leave a little time for questions, if there are any of those. And then also just some thank yous, and I probably missed people, but I really want to thank our participants with aphasia and their families. We learn so much, and our entire research agenda is influenced by what we learned from our friends with aphasia and their families. And then my colleagues and our students, for whom I couldn't do all this work if it weren't for them. That's it.
Thank you, Sarah.
Welcome.
So my question, we have time for 2 quick questions as we work our way through things.
Sure.
The big nugget, the one thought, the one piece that if you walk away with anything, what do you want folks to remember?
I think that probably the big thing is even just to be thinking about reading and reading comprehension supports, so that we aren't likely to fix all the reading problems that people have. And so how are we equipping them with some supports that might help in their real life? So even just to consider the supports would be my takeaway.
Sure. And you've been to a few aphasia access things over the years. What's your favorite aphasia access memory? And do you want to tell the potato chip story?
Well, I mean, that's the one that stands out. But, last year I had the great opportunity to co-chair with Katie Strong, who is an amazing human being and made my job so much easier. And we had so much fun together. So probably my favorite memory is just everything about spending the conference and the time leading up to the summit with her, and getting to learn from her and laugh with her and panic and stress with her. But for those of you who don't plan to stay awake for the potato chip story, Todd was craving potato chips at the leadership summit. I don't know, there was lots of food there, so I'm not sure.
We were roaming the halls during the breakout sessions, checking on room sets and everything, you, me, and Katie.
Yeah, and so no matter how much money he put into this vending machine to get potato chips, new things kept getting stuck, right? So I was shaking the vending machine with everything I had in me, and eventually just gave up and tried to stick my arm up into the vending machine, like laying down on the floor and reaching up into it. And Todd very kindly snapped a picture of that beautiful, memorable moment. So thank you, Todd.
Come back for her with Sarah's chat with Audrey Holland later tonight. You'll get to see that picture. It's already
wonderful.
It's already been old and it's been waiting. And the last funny thing is it's like the planets are aligning. Sarah's talk here is 25% in. I just did the calculations. Her talk with Audrey is the middle point of the teach-in.
Perfect. It's like we planned it.
No one. It just happened. But we're grateful. Thank you so much, Sarah. We'll see you in a few hours. Get some rest.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.